Welcome to the Calm Cockpit, where pilots of all levels can find high-performance tools, actionable strategies, and access to professionals who can help you fly smarter and stress less.
Today, we welcome back Jeffrey J.J. Madison and his remarkable story about how he returned to the airlines at age 60 after being out of the cockpit for 14 years.
And he didn't do it with luck. He did it with discipline, on the ground and in the air.
He did it by treating his day-to-day life, his movement, nutrition, rest, and mental health with the kind of structure and consistency you'd expect from someone preparing for a major event, not someone easing into retirement.
This is a story and strategies that every pilot needs to hear.
The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I'm Geeta Brown, licensed yoga and meditation and music educator with over 30 years of teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress. And I'm also a student pilot.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and flight instructor.
Today marks a day where we are bringing on our first repeat guest, Jeffrey J.J. Madison. He first came on our show with episode 17, talking all about his book, Yikes! And we loved having him on, and in some of our conversations, we got into his remarkable story about how he came back to the airlines. And we said, Jeffrey, you got to come back on and teach us more about this, because he really has a lot of strategies for dialing in exercise, nutrition, sleep, and mindset. And he said he'd be thrilled to come back on. He's going to talk about the workouts that he used for stamina, the sleep habits that he used, more and more and more mindset strategies. So I want to give you just a very brief bio for him, and he's going to give you more of his story in the interview. But he's a Harvard-educated instructor. He's a mentor, airline pilot, author, aviation advocate, on and on and on and on and on. He is a very accomplished person, and you'll hear a lot of his story in the interview. We're going to let him do the talking in the interview so you can hear a little bit more about his remarkable story. And then on the other side, John and I will wrap things up and give you a little teaser that there might even perhaps be more coming with Jeffrey J.J. Madison to help you meet your aviation goals. So I think without further ado, let's get to the interview with JJ.
Jeffrey J.J. Madison, welcome back to the Calm Cockpit.
Great to be here.
Yeah, we're so happy. You're our first recurring guest. So this is kind of a favorite moment of ours all of a sudden.
I am very pleased and excited to be your first recurring.
JJ, we haven't seen you since kind of fall of 2025. It is January 2026. And for those that haven't heard your episode, or maybe it's been a while, refresh our listeners' memory on kind of who you are and how you got to where you are.
Sure. So I started flying at 32 years old. I'm 62 right now. So I've been flying for 30 years. I got started out of desperation. I was writing screenplays in Hollywood, and I was doing okay. But after 7 years, I hadn't made it huge, and I was getting burned out from the grind. And I needed to do something different, I thought to myself, or I'm going to die. And I decided to do some freelance writing. And I met a guy who owned his own helicopter flight school after tragically being injured and no longer being able to be a Jamaican track star. And I thought that was an interesting story. I'd write an article about you. I said to him, and maybe it could get into a magazine or two. It got into Black Enterprise magazine. 18 months later, he let me know it had done so well for him that he'd gotten so many customers off that if I continued to write for him, he would teach me to fly helicopter. So that's when my first pilot license was, a private pilot helicopters. And then that really kind of forced me to think about how I'm going to get out of writing and get into aviation on some level. And by opening myself up to that, I met 3 Tuskegee Airmen who, after I told them my tale, they said, "Come on, kid, we'll take you under our wing." And they sort of mentored and guided me and told me how to get an aviation professional pilot degree at Long Beach City College for just $11.50 per credit. And I got my fixed wing transition and all that good stuff within about a 2-year period. And in 2000, I got hired at that time, the largest boom in airline pilot hiring in the U.S. And flew for almost 10 years before the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009 ended my career along with 30,000 other pilots. I didn't fly again for like 14 years. I ended up back in communications and media production at a university, but I was very, very vain about my first class medical and my CFI. I'd worked very hard to get those, so I kept those up during that 14-year period. And I stayed in aviation by becoming an AOPA mentor, and I wrote Human Factors, a column analyzing NASA reports for general aviation news for 6 years. And in 2023, post-COVID, ran into a friend at the international terminal at LAX. He was a Southwest Airlines pilot captain. I had no idea why he would be in the international terminal at LAX, but I think if you're a Buddhist, you believe he's there for a reason. We re-met him, hugged it out, and he said, "When are you getting back into the airlines?" And after a lot of cajoling from 4 other friends who are now captains at both United and Southwest, I put in an application at PSA Airlines, a wholly owned subsidiary of American, because they had a DCA base. I live in DC, and they contacted me immediately and offered me a position almost immediately thereafter. And so at 60 years old, I had the great good fortune of becoming an airline pilot again back in 2023.
That's amazing.
Cue the crowd noise. That is epic. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of great things, serendipity, and a lot of staying in shape and making me think that it was actually possible that I could do it. So I'm very fortunate that I had the mental and physical rigor that I maintained throughout my time post airlines so that I could actually succeed and overcome the challenges that go into becoming an airplane pilot again at 60 years old.
And I mean this in the nicest way possible. You don't look 60 at all. So congratulations. Yeah. Between the hard work you've put in and I'm sure some good genes, you don't look 60 in any way. So
well, I appreciate that. A lot of people say I don't look a day over 70. So coming from you, that's very kind.
Hey, if I can look as good as you do at 60, I'll be doing all right. So
you can.
That's why
what
we're
this
here
podcast
today.
is all about.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, that's what this is all about. So when we interviewed you back in the fall, you had mentioned a little bit about all of this and how your first class medical meant a lot to you and the things that you did to maintain, should you ever want to reemerge into the aviation career pathway. And so Geeta actually had the idea of, well, maybe that would be a really good like January episode because everybody's thinking about becoming fit again and New Year's resolutions and things like that. So this is a perfect time for us to talk about all of these things. And so when we think about kind of your physical and mental readiness and how you kind of took that from leaving the pilot career and then re-emerging into the pilot career, like what did you do and what did you think about to get from point A to point B?
I should disclaim this in saying past performance is no indication of future results.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I would say this. When I was writing in Hollywood, I had a friend who was an actor there. He was in his 50s, late 50s, early 60s. And he said to me, what you do in your 40s shows up in your 50s. And what you do in your 50s shows up in your 60s. What you do in your 60s shows up in your 70s, and so on and so on. And that was kind of like the first time I'd taken something to heart from somebody older than me, because I was pretty arrogant back then and thought I knew what was going on. But I looked at him and I realized, I'm looking at him and I'm hearing what he's saying, and he looks pretty good. And he'd recovered from some stuff that he had done in his 30s and 40s into his 50s. And so I took that to heart. So even though I was no longer an airline pilot back in 2009-ish, I realized that I felt that it was important for me to be able to maintain my first class medical. That was mostly out of vanity, but then it also turned out to be a good thing because it sort of kept me on a health track. And so I try to keep up what I had started doing. When I made turboprop captain, I started running again, and that helped. I thought I was in pretty good shape, but I had dropped some pounds and I had more vigor, right? And so I'm not a big fan of running. I ran in grade school, middle school, and high school, but I did that. But then I transitioned back into bike. That's what kind of kept me healthy and I would say sane. That, and I focused on lifting weights. At the time, in my 40s, when I met my wife, she had 2 trainers. And at that time, I thought, I don't need a trainer. I know how to lift weights. I've been lifting since I was a kid. I did one training session with one of her trainers, and I realized, I don't know how to lift weights. I've been lifting since I was a kid. So they adopted me. I now have two trainers. So one who focuses on core strength and one who focuses on strength training, in addition to my own cardio stuff.
So a lot of that is kind of the mental game. I mean, I know that I fall in and out of habits quite regularly. Sometimes it's the running aspect. Sometimes it's sort of all around just general physical fitness. But then, as with anybody, and a lot of times now being January, I can commiserate with a lot of the other people thinking about this. It's I do it for 2 months and then life gets busy and I move on to something else and go, oh shoot. Yeah. That felt good, but now I got to start all over again. Like, how do you maintain? How do you keep that mental game going where it's just you do it as a routine?
You know, it's I've in my life I've found it's much harder to get back in shape than to stay in shape. So I just focus on trying to stay in shape. And the great thing about having trainers is that they hold me accountable. One, because I have to show up, otherwise they get the money anyway. And two, because they help me find things that might be going wrong, or if I have a complaint about something, they can help fix it. I've adapted this great thing that my wife found from somebody, I think a Dr. Attia, who said, train like an athlete, TLAA, train like an athlete. And we live like athletes. Flying is fun, but it's also arduous at times. Going through time zones, going through altitude, sitting in pressurized cabins, sitting, and then disrupted sleep patterns are, if you think about it, that's what professional athletes go through, right? Because they travel all over the country and sometimes all over the world in order to play their sports professionally. And so what does a professional athlete do? And so I kind of looked at what I know through the media, what professional athletes do. What they seem to do is show up at a venue, play their game, and then they go rest and eat well and sleep as long as you can. And then they go fly somewhere, and then they go rest, and then they go practice, and then they eat, and then they rest, and then they play their game, and then they just apply, lather, rinse, repeat. So that's how I kind of treat the game of playing of airline pilot. I remember in my 30s, any new city that I flew into, I would want to explore, and if that meant not working out or not getting exactly 7-8 hours of sleep, and I recovered pretty well. In my 40s, I pretended like I was in my 30s, and it sort of masked itself. I didn't feel any real noticeable bugs about it. But now that I'm in my 60s, back in the flight deck, I recognize that this is how I need to be, that I need to live like an athlete, play like an athlete. I show up. My game is when I show up at the airport in uniform to the public, and then I go fly the airplane. So that's my performance. And then the post game is saying goodbye to everybody and going through the airport because we're still on duty and people are still looking at us. And then getting to the hotel and getting as much rest as soon as possible. So I am senior slam clicker. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Slam the door shut. Click the lock.
You're done.
That's right.
Time for rest.
Love you guys, but I gotta do me.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps, and also I bring my own food to the greatest extent possible. The great thing about the iPad age of documents in aviation is there no longer are you carrying massive books around in flight bags. So the flight bags are now refrigerated. And so that allows us to, instead of eating airport food and airplane food, as much as possible, I can eat my own food. So I control my food intake as well.
I want to pop in one sec because we could go down the food rabbit hole in a minute, but I love this idea of thinking of yourself like an athlete. It's something I talk to musicians about all the time with very similar thing, whether you're a high school musician or you're traveling professionally. Same deal. Crazy schedule, long hours, and musicians were sitting in these crammed pits for shows, all the same stuff. And I think anyone, though, GA pilots too, you look at, man, like I did my solo cross countries, probably it was like 98 degrees, 95% humidity. Holy moly. I needed the electrolytes. Yeah. John and I were talking about that. I needed to make sure I had food on board and that I was getting into AC, in between those legs. I think sometimes we don't think of what our lives as athletes, but really I think everyone is an athlete of their life. So it's not like, I'm going to exercise now. Everything you do in your lifestyle is helping you function your life as an athlete. Whether you're picking up your kids from school or you're flying an airplane, or whether you're in college to train, it's the whole ecosystem. It's not just the workout itself. It's the whole mindset around it. So I love this idea of like train like an athlete, whether you're on the stage for the Olympics or not. I think everybody can do that. And GA pilots, especially, I'm looking at you. You have to be on your game. What we do is serious and important. So I just wanted to highlight that.
I like that. Yeah. And I like how you said it doesn't matter if you're a GA pilot or you're a professional, because I remember, like you, getting dehydrated and being a flight instructor. And so it's really important to be hydrated and hydrated smartly. I don't drink any sodas. I try to limit my juice consumption. I drink as much water as possible. I remember a grizzled old captain once told me, when I was doing the transcontinental commuting back and forth to my home and to my job at my first airline job, never turn down the water and sleep whenever you can when you're commuting. And so I take that into account. And I agree that applies, I think, even to GA pilots and CFIs, right? If there's a moment, an hour or two between pilots, why not take a quick nap? There's nothing wrong with taking a power nap and drinking smartly. I love sodas. I'm not gonna lie to you. I would drink sodas all day. I'm not somebody who can just eschew sodas at a moment's notice. I love sugary drinks, but I also love me. And for me, it's more important for me to not have the rush and crash of a sugary drink because of the taste, because I like the taste. It's more important for me to be hydrated and have water. And then if I need to add some sort of uniodized salt, some sort of natural salt to it. And or lemon.
It's interesting. Ever since starting this podcast, my Facebook feed and all of the news that pops up to me has completely changed. And it's interesting that you mention juice, because I've seen so many articles and videos of people talking about how bad juice actually is for you. When you think about, like, when you're a kid and your mom's like, hey, have a glass of orange juice, like, you think that orange juice is actually healthy. When you actually dig into it, it's actually not that good for you. And between the sugars and the additives and all of the other things, it's not a healthy drink.
Just eat the orange. The orange.
That's right. That's right.
You'll get all the hydration, but you'll get a lot of extra good stuff too.
I've learned to actually eat the fruit.
Hey, how about that?
That's something I didn't do on it. Yeah, eating. That's right. That's right, John. The drink tastes great. Less filling, but
the other thing about this podcast, and it has helped me because it's forcing some positive change in my life, but truly a lot of this comes down to the idea of, do as the guests say, not as I do. and as a 39-year-old professional pilot, and hearing you say that things changed in your 40s, nothing's going to change for me in a year, right? I can still not sleep and eat poorly and be totally fine.
No, he's shaking his head.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we, our goal in life is not to live as long as possible. It's to live as healthy for as long as possible. Right. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I have done a little bit of research, and we've been consulting with some functional medicine doctors, and to a consensus, they agree that there are three major changes in a person's life physiologically. Around age 44, something just happens in everybody. Around age 60, again, something happens. And for me, it was like 62. This is the weird year for me. Physiologically, had some weird things happen, but thankfully, because we've really worked on being in shape, they've been mitigated. And then the next big one is at 75. Age 75, there's a real crash that nobody can escape. Everybody will hit it, but the question is how well can you absorb that shock in all those cases? And again, they're not exactly 44, they're not exactly 60. Your results may vary. So just because you're fantastic looking at 39 right now, John, doesn't mean that somewhere in the next 4 or 5 years, or even before 44, something might change drastically. The great news is, you can fix it, right? Almost every environmental disease, almost every autoimmune disease currently that we used to think is immutable and genetically predispositioned to be terminal or fatal or permanent, turn out that with the right combination of diet, exercise, lifestyle, and environmental changes can be either lessened or reversed completely.
Yes.
I'm gonna say it controversially. Diabetes is reversible.
Agreed.
And here's one thing that got me. Here's the rabbit hole. So before the internet, I remember I went to a doctor and they asked me, "Did you ever smoke?" And I said, "Yeah, I smoked in my teens." And they said, "Well, have you smoked since then?" I was in my 30s or something, late 30s. I said, "No." He said, "Good. You'll another 10 years, your body will never know you smoked. Anything that's going on in your lungs will be completely pink again." And I thought, whoa. That's cool.
Yeah, your body replenishes every 12 years. You've got a completely new set of cells or something?
All the cells are constantly turning over. The stomach turns over very, very quickly. Bone is a lot slower to grow. I mean, I'll give you all the rates later if we want to really nerd out on it. But your body is constantly turning cells over. Yeah. So you're not the same person, John, that you were 30 years ago. That can lead you down a rabbit hole of consciousness. Who am I? We won't go there, though. But you're absolutely right. So many of the things that especially aviators in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are starting to deal with: high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, the sort of classics of Western chronic illness. Most of them are completely reversible. We only need to look at the work of Dr. Dean Ornish, who has done work proving that you can reverse heart disease with diet and lifestyle solutions. And these are now paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. This is not, out there. It's proven science at this point. We just need to get it in the hands of more people. But it really requires taking a lot of personal accountability, JJ. I mean, you're living almost like a monk's lifestyle, right? Like a singular focus on what you're doing, but very rich. And I think that takes real strength and courage and setting a lot of boundaries, because most of the world is not doing that. So I applaud you in those efforts.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We do try to live purposefully, right? There's an anchor on the local television who always says at the end, signs off with "Have a great day on purpose." And that's kind of like how we try to live, is right. Purposeful living. It's the same. It's no different from that phrase where somebody says whether you think you can or you think you can't, it's the same, right? And so whether you plan to have a great life or whether you don't plan to have a great life, it's the same. You're going to plan to have a great life. There's a very good chance you'll have at least a pretty good life. But if you don't plan, in my experience, if I don't plan to have a good life, I've seen myself fall apart. And I think COVID was kind of a wake-up call, in the sense that during that time, during that shutdown, I was 57. So I thought I was in pretty good shape. I was talking, and I go to the cardiologist every couple of years. I've done that ever since I was an airline pilot, and as well as going to regular doctors. And between the two doctors, I had a silent health scare that I had no idea was lurking. Frankly, that scared the crap out of me. Right. Because I didn't think that I was in bad shape. I was lifting regularly. COVID gave me the opportunity to get into high intensity interval training. So the core aspect of high intensity interval training is you do something for a very short period of time, extremely intense, and then you stop and then you do it again. There are a lot of books on it. There's a lot of video out there on YouTube about it. The idea is pick whatever you like. For me, it was biking. And the concept is you freak your body out by doing this stuff. And your body's, like with any kind of weight training or anything like that, you tear muscles a little bit, micro tears, and then your body repairs that. So with high intensity interval training, you freak your body out. And so then it rushes to repair the stuff you freaked out on about it, whether it's the external muscles, the internal muscles, your lungs, whatever. And then once you've got that all repaired, if you continue to do high intensity interval training over a period of months or years, then what happens is the stuff you didn't know was a problem because you don't feel it, then your body is finished repairing all the stuff that you knew about. It starts repairing all the stuff you don't know about. So that's the core thing about it. If you can do high intensity interval training for at least a year, your body will undergo significant changes, most of which you weren't even aware of were a problem. And the only way I found that out was because I went back to my functional medicine doctor, my cardiologist, a year later, and I thought I was in good shape at 190 pounds. I had dropped to 165 pounds. My blood pressure went down to like what my wife's is, from 120 over 70s. It was ridiculous. And all of the inflammation that had been a problem that I wasn't aware of was gone. So for me, COVID was great because it allowed me to train, in addition to the regular stuff, for 3 or 4 days more intensely than ever before. I don't do that the same now, but I do maintain at least to 70% of that intensity because I saw the results that I didn't even know that I needed to have.
And you started that in your late 50s. Let the record show.
I did.
Everyone hear that.
I did.
So often we're told as you get older, slow down, be careful. you're going to hurt yourself. You got to take it easy. Your joints can't do that. And the science is showing it's completely the opposite. We have to stress our bodies out with impact, with high intensity interval training, with lifting weights to force those adaptive changes, because we're now living longer than we ever did in the history of mankind.
That's
and
right.
the science is now catching up, like, oh, we actually have to continue to purposefully and under the guidance of trainers, literally stress our bodies out so that those billions of processes that are going on continue to promote neuroplasticity, grow new bones, do all that autoimmune stuff that you're talking about. It's magic. It's hard work though. HIIT training. Woo! HIIT will leave you with heaving over a bucket in the corner. Like it will.
It does. It does. And I'm not recommending it for everybody, but there's I have the concept of VO2 max where you just work up to 80% of your max. That is just as good if you're doing that on a regular basis. For young people, I would say just find something that you like and do it regularly and make sure it's portable because that speaks to what you talked about, John, is that you do it for a couple months, but then, the dust and the detritus of life get in the way. When I went to training, when I went to Indoc, we drove from DC to Vandalia, Ohio. The training was in Dayton. And we drove because I needed to bring my stationary bike, the trainer, which is a stationary, like triangular apparatus you put on the back wheel that you can add, because I couldn't guarantee that there were bikes or any kind of equipment at the hotels, or that they would be available when I needed them, right? And my wife went with me, and she brought her rebounder. You guys know what a rebounder is?
Mm-mm.
Do you know what a mini trampoline is?
Yes.
Okay, that's a rebounder.
Oh.
All right. So basically it's about 4 feet wide or something. You can fold it up. You know what? Those things, people like to joke about them when we talk about when we're doing the rebounding. Oh, it's cute. Rebounding is great because it clears your lymph node glands and nodes and the whole lymphatic system. And why is that important? Because the lymph system is an entirely passive system. Meaning you can't get it to do anything. You can't make it move. You can't get stuff through it just by flexing your muscles or by consciously attempting to do something to make it move. Like with your lungs, you can increase your lung capacity by you can breathe. You can breathe deep breaths and stuff. You can increase your muscle mass by increasing your weights. You can excrete through your kidneys and kind of clean out that system by drinking more fluids or the right kinds of fluids. But with the lymph system, it's very passive. There's nothing that you can do with it. But rebounding has been found to activate the lymph system so it helps drain you out. And that's really important because if your lymph system is clogged, that inhibits healing. If you're sick, it compromises immunity because you're building it, and it also keeps toxins in the body.
Movement is medicine.
That's right. Movement's medicine.
It really is. It's not just like something you should do for an hour here or there. It's weaving it into your life in intelligent ways. Didn't I say you were a monk? You're literally driving with you bring the bike. I mean,
yeah.
Wow,
Well, yeah,
that's next
right.
level.
I the joke was I needed to be able to keep up with. I had a guy in my class who was 21 years old. I just turned 21, so I had to keep up with 21 and 30-year-olds. And I'm not. I mean, I'm old enough to recognize I'm not gonna keep up with them without some serious effort. I love what you said about how movement's medicine, because we think of food as medicine and sleep as medicine, right?
And they are, yeah.
Right. And so part of training like an athlete, living like an athlete, is what we eat. I make sure that I pay attention to what I eat. If I have to eat French fries because there's nothing else there, I actually will wait till the next day to make them when they're cold, because cold French fries, cold potatoes actually become a resistant starch. And a resistant starch is better than like a simple starch, because simple starch can lead to insulin resistance and diabetes. But a resistant starch actually becomes a complex carbohydrate, which is what your body needs.
I am resistant to cold French fries. I'm sorry.
It's an acquired taste. It's not for everybody.
It's an acquired taste.
And I can respect that. That's the kind of thing.
Only because you suggested it. I'll try it someday, but I don't know, man.
Right. You can do the same thing with potatoes. And sleep. Sleep is medicine. I like to say sleep is good food, and food is medicine. Sleep is the only time that the body really gets a chance to repair itself is during sleep. And so I'm really selfish about my sleep. Every morning I'll ask my captain or my flight attendants, hey, how'd you all sleep? And we'll talk about it. And you can tell just anecdotally throughout the day who's had the really good sleep. And that matters.
So you mentioned kind of the 3 ages that things tend to change. And I don't know if you knew about that philosophy going into the 44 one, but obviously you knew about it going into the 62 one. What did you change, or how did you prepare for the eventuality that, like, I may not know exactly where this is or when it's going to happen, but I know something's going to happen? So did you do something differently to kind of get yourself ready for that outside of what you've already mentioned?
Right, that's a good question. I should back up and say I didn't find out about the 60. I didn't find out about these three ages until this year. And so
Oh,
right. So the 44 was just kind of like, okay, that made sense. I can think back to it. But the 60, I was like, okay, that makes sense because of what's happening with me right now. 62, I'm having some weird stuff going on physiologically. So because of that, I was just really grateful that I had been, since 2020, been doing HIIT and really paying attention to weightlifting and core, all, just really focusing on all three and making sure that I did all that. That's how I prepared for what's happening with my body now. 75, it's more the same, but increased muscle. And Steve Harvey jokes, muscle is currency as you age. But it's not a joke. We have an orthopedic surgeon who we see every couple of years because there's inevitably something going on with the shoulder or the elbow or the wrist or something. And he told us almost more than 15 years ago, you guys are going to have to exercise vigorously the rest of your lives. And this was another moment where I was listening to somebody who was an authority, and I looked at him. He was our age and he was in pretty good shape. And 15 years later, he's still our age. He's still in great shape. That's what we've been doing. And that's what I would, advise people to figure out a way to exercise vigorously. Because as you said, Geeta, movement is medicine. And we're not talking about extreme sports, unless that's something you're into now, but recognize that by moderate, I mean you're doing it consistently, but you're not doing it to the point of total exhaustion every time. But moderate, vigorous exercise 3 to 5 times a week, combining cardio, if it's possible for you, HIIT, if not VO2 max, and then weightlifting is really key. That's a long way to say it. So we've increased our weightlifting. I've increased my weightlifting because there's more research that indicates that the more muscle you have as you get into your 60s and beyond, the less likely you are to have fall injuries, balance injury complications, general illness, and you'll keep your metabolism up, which means you'll keep your weight at a good level. Whatever that level is, which improves your quality of life as you get old. Right now, I think of myself as middle, but when I get to 75, I'll legitimately be old. So
well, that's good advice.
I want to have like big thighs by the time I'm 75. So that, because 40% of your muscle mass, right? 40% of all your weight's in your thighs.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Big thighs at 75.
Blast those quads, man. Blast them.
That's right. That's right.
Somewhere in the world, a former guest of ours, Lachey Bacon from Mile High Health Club, is smiling at all of the things that you have said in terms of diet, nutrition, and exercise. And for those that don't know, she runs a fitness program and a nutrition program specifically for pilots, especially for traveling pilots, and trying to kind of compensate for that lifestyle. And like you said, giving them exercises where you can either go to the hotel gym or even do it in your hotel with no equipment to try to keep yourself in shape, even for sort of the busy, crazy travel lifestyles that we have. So yeah, somewhere she is smiling. I want to talk for a second about mindset. One of the things you talked about was just the idea that you do see multiple physicians. You see them sort of on a regular basis. You talked about the cardiologist and things like that. And I think one of the main issues that we have for sort of career aviators, but also, people who have their pilot certificate and fly for fun, like everybody's afraid of losing that medical. Now, things are changing with Mosaic and some of that other stuff that's coming out, but that tends to lead to the idea of ignorance is bliss. If I feel fine, why rock the boat? Why go to the doctor and get bad news? Because all that's going to do is create cascading failures down the way. You have taken a different route, and I think that it's wise, and I actually kind of feel the same way in my own life. I'm not afraid to go to the doctor, but there is also that kind of like, oh God, what are they going to find? How did you kind of get to that place, and what keeps you going in the sense of not being afraid to see that physician, not being worried about what they might say or what that might lead to in terms of what your next medical would be?
One word: vanity. And I mean that seriously. I worked really hard to get my CFI and my first class medical and to become an airline pilot. And I worked really hard at every phase of my pilot journey, to get those ratings and to get those hours and to have those experiences. And I don't want to lose those. I want to continue to have those for as long as possible because they fill me. Being a pilot fills me, whether I'm an instructor or an airline pilot. That whole concept just fills me, and I don't want to lose that. So Michael Jordan once said, after he famously lobbed a half-court shot just on a whim on an indoor court that he'd never been on, and he swished it, the cameraman said to him, "Weren't you afraid you were going to miss that?" And he said, "Why would I be afraid of missing a shot I never took?" So I don't know if that applies in this case, but when it comes to the doctors, I'm not afraid of the doctor. Why would I want to be afraid of a doctor for advice that I don't know about? I don't know. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't translate, but it's what came to mind with your question, John. I think the biggest thing about going to the doctor is I don't have to fear the unknown. I'm either going to know it or there isn't anything to be fearful of.
I mean, I know in my case, there is a little bit of the ignorance is bliss, I suppose. But I also, from a practical standpoint, realize that, yes, something could be wrong. Yes, something could happen to my medical, but the odds of recovering it if I find it early are a lot higher than waiting until it's so bad that I can't do anything about it. And I think that that's something for people in the new year and who are thinking about, well, how am I going to change my life for 2026? I think that being able to preventative maintenance, pilots love that. I mean, we incorporate that into every aspect of our lives except health in a lot of cases. I sold a car on Facebook Marketplace a handful of years ago, and the gentleman that bought the car, he said, "All right, well, just meet me in the parking lot and, we'll do this thing." And I said, "Okay." And I get there and he hands me cash. And I said, "Don't you want to drive it? Don't you want to check it out? Like, I could be lying. Like, this car could not run at all." And he goes, "No, I saw that you were a pilot and pilots take care of their things. They do maintenance and even things that don't need to be done." And he was right. I had just bought new tires for that car. I had lost money on that deal. So we're willing to incorporate that type of preventative maintenance into everything. And yet so many of us are afraid to do that for our own bodies. We're afraid to go to the doctor. We're afraid to fix those little things. They could turn into big things. But when we go to our jobs, we have every expectation that those tires are fresh, that those brakes work, that the oil's been changed. So it's just an interesting sort of dichotomy between those two philosophies. And it's interesting to see that you've kind of met that head on and chosen that type of lifestyle.
Well, I mean, it's not easy. I'm not going to lie to you. I think the FAA sadly set up that dichotomy. On the one hand, the United States is one of the easiest places on the planet to get a first-class medical, right? Based upon the old school way of doing things. Things are getting a little more sort of regimented and standardized now, but it's still a great place to get and pretty easy place to get a first-class medical. And as a result, what's that set up is, hey, if I don't know about it, then we don't all have to know about it, right? So that sets up this vicious circle where people aren't willing to go to the doctor to find something out. Amplified by the fact that if you do lose your medical, it used to be, historically, been a very difficult thing to regain, even if it was for a minor thing. And only recently, and I just found this out because I got my medical renewed, that there's this whole new process that the AMEs are going through where they can kind of pre-screen you for stuff. And if you've got something, they can stop the medical process. They can stop doing everything, and then they can get you kind of situated, and then you can come back and you can restart the process, or you can wait a certain period of time and the process that you started disappears from the database, and then you can just start over to get that. And so without actually having to jeopardize your medical with the condition that you may have just found out you had. So that's great because now that encourages people to potentially, we pilots, to actually look at stuff and get stuff fixed. The other great thing is, are you familiar with CACI? I think it's the document. It's several hundred pages that tells you all the things that you can or cannot take if you're flying and what the interactions are. And so that's available online. You can actually search that. And you can get a heads up now and find out what kind of medicines you might be taking or what your condition might be, and then talk to your practitioner or healthcare practitioner in advance of going to the AME and see if you can get that stuff adjusted to something that actually will not jeopardize your medical. And so because things are becoming more transparent, it's now more possible to admit that you might have something and then get it fixed before you actually have to, actually do the medical.
It's almost like a letter of discontinuance for your medical.
That's right. And I was at the recent National Association of Flight Instructors Summit in Ohio. The head doctor for the FAA was there and talked about how they're doing everything they can and talked about the processes they went through to cleaning up backlogs on medical reevaluations. And they went from something where they had like 18,000 backlog and it was taking 6 to 18 months to get them, that they're down to under 300 backlogged.
Wow.
And so yeah, they really are working on making this an easier process for pilots. So that's another reason to consider as a pilot going to a healthcare practitioner or finding out what it is that you've got good or bad going on with you and working on getting that fixed, and then working with the database to find out what you can or cannot take, which might cause you to lose or have your medical suspended, so that you can actually adjust that medicine or what have you too, so that you don't have to. So these are great steps the FAA is taking to improve our lives physically.
Yeah, I agree. They're making some really great strides in a lot of different areas. So I commend the FAA for that. And obviously, there's a lot of progress on some of the mental health things too. And so I think that times are changing. It's a good time to be in this sort of field.
That mental health thing, real quick, that's a kind of a big deal. I remember in 2016 when the Lufthansa incident. Mm-hmm. When it turned out that the FO had the depression issues and then decided to commit suicide by plane, take everybody with him. I remember that was a really bad time for pilots, because whereas the FAA had been working on programs to address stress in the pilot community, people just kind of clammed up. It's like, no way am I going to tell anybody that I'm depressed because of a divorce or a death or what have you, because I don't want to lose my medical. So they're now working vigorously to regain the trust of pilots through mental health programs that they're initiating. And that's important. I will say this, when I was my first time as a pilot, an airline pilot, I went through a divorce, and the employee assistance program saved me. It was anonymous, and I was allowed, I think, up to 12 sessions. I think I took 4. But just being able to talk to somebody about going through a divorce relieved the stress and allowed me to focus on flying. Because divorce, apparently, of the top 10 things that stressors in a person's life, is number 2 only to the death of a loved one. So yeah, it's real. The emotional problems that are associated with navigating a divorce are real. And EAP saved me. And I highly recommend it, people who are professionals who are going through something. If they've got a good company with a good union and a good EAP, take advantage of it.
Wow. I didn't know that even existed, so it's a relatively new world for me. So was it, you were able to speak to like a licensed therapist, or was it like peer-to-peer? It was a therapist.
Therapist, yeah. The company had a therapist on hire, or at some point they transitioned to a third-party contractor, but it was a licensed therapist.
And you felt comfortable speaking to this person, not like, oh, they're going to kind of take some notes and report on back, but it was a robust culture there of security.
It was confidential. I was assured that it was confidential, and as a result, I was able to open up. So, yeah.
What a gift. Yeah. What a gift.
And it's a little bit different when you don't work for an airline or something like that. But even in my case, I work for a Fortune 500 company. It's not aviation based, but there are programs within non-aviation companies as well that if you need help with, whether it be sort of the therapeutic side of things or even, God forbid, a substance abuse issue or things like that, just remember that a lot of times employers do have help assistance programs for a lot of those different things. And at that point, if it's the choice between going down a dark path and having a medical be revoked or lost for even a temporary period of time, I mean, really, there is no comparison, people. Like, do you fix yourself and then worry about some of the other professional things later, because your life is not worth your medical certificate.
Or having something come out sideways as a result of you keeping it in, and then something happens either to the plane or to you because you weren't paying attention. There's a great chapter in my book called There's a Spouse in My Head, and it's all about how people get distracted because of, in my particular case, it was my wife. We were flying together. We lost our alternator, so we lost our electrical power. And even though it was a non-event, really, I temporarily turned it into an event because I began to think about my wife is right next to me. We're 15 miles from the airport. I've got plenty of fuel, but I don't have in it. But it's dusk. It's good. It's about to be night, and I don't have any electricity. And until I kind of snapped out of it, I was completely distracted. And I didn't snap out of it. A guy in the pattern snapped me out of it because I said, I'm coming in for a downwind landing. He goes, well, if it's really not an emergency, because you do have power, and you can see the field. How about you just join the panel with the rest of us? So that snapped me out of it. It goes on to talk about there's a mechanic who, because his wife was sick and was so worried about her and had gotten a phone call that she had just been admitted to the hospital, his lead told him to go ahead and take the rest of the day off and go join his wife. But he hadn't fixed a butterfly or a specific kind of fastener to a wheel assembly on a 757, and the lead didn't inspect that, and the guy who took over for him didn't double check to make sure. It was a cotter pin, that's what they're called. And 3 days later, that wheel fell off in flight. So this is real. When you're mentally distracted because of psychological problems that relate to you being a human being on the planet, living in relationship with other people, things can come out sideways. Fortunately, nobody was hurt or killed when the wheel assembly departed the airplane.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because first and foremost, let's mention the book, Yikes, that you wrote, and how all of the proceeds for that book go to your foundation. And JJ, tell our audience a little bit about the book real quick, and then I've got a follow-up question for you, but I want to know about the book and what does the foundation do?
So thank you very much. Yikes, 100 Smart Pilots, the Dumb Things They Did, Live to Tell About It, is the compilation of the best of the 6 years of the human factors columns I wrote for General Aviation News. My wife and I started a foundation called the Victor Kilo Fund. And the Victor Kilo Fund is named that because Victor Kilo is Greek for 1,000 victories. And it takes about 1,000 little victories for us anywhere in your life to achieve a big goal. And all the proceeds from it go to creating flight scholarships or other kind of training scholarships for student pilots, AMTs, meteorologists, ATC personnel wannabes, to support Civil Air Patrol programs, flight schools, under-resourced flight schools, and or STEM groups. So that's why I wrote the book. We've been very fortunate, been doing pretty well with it. That's
certainly a sense of purpose that I'm sure keeps you going in terms of that mental game of keeping yourself in peak conditioning and all of that. And you kind of mentioned this already a little bit, but I wanted to just kind of follow up on it. You've read a lot of NASA reports over the years, whether it be for your column or for the book, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you just kind of sit around reading ones just in your spare time.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah. I'm sure that outside of there's a spouse in your head, there's probably a lot of these that you've read where it's maybe triggered some change in you mentally or even physically, caused you to want to do certain exercises or things like that. Like, what kinds of fitness lessons have you come across in some of these where, man, if that pilot really had been in better shape or been there mentally, it could have changed the outcome of whatever you read?
It's so interesting you say that and you bring that up. I think there are two or three that come immediately to mind. So hypoxia is one. Hypoxia, the one that we're most familiar with is hypoxia. And then I don't remember the one where if you're a smoker, it impedes your ability for oxygen uptake. But what it turns out is that you don't have to be a smoker for that to happen. And so studying all the hypoxia, it really inspired me to stay in shape, because your ability to intake oxygen, which is vital for brain function, does matter based upon your shape, your physical conditioning. And even though most general aviation pilots don't go into fly above, 14,5, or in those areas between 8 and 14,000 where oxygen is noticeably less available, you're still, the fact that you're at any altitude, you're still breathing less oxygen than when you're on the ground. So the ability of your body to use as much as is available to the best of its ability at any altitude, it kind of inspired me to really get back in cardio shape.
Gives you that youthful glow too.
Yeah.
No, it does. In yoga, they call it, a lot of these breathing practices, they call it skull shining and all of that, because it increases oxygen to all of the tissues. And that includes, talking vanity, that includes the wrinkle lines and the face and all that. So, hey, look younger inside and out.
That's right. I love it. And then the second thing I would talk about is hydrating. Aside from the idea of when the crusty old airline pilot told me drink, never turn down the water, I didn't take that really into account until I started reading about people who are dehydrated. And dehydration is a funny thing because it doesn't present just like dry throat and all that sort of, it really presents sort of worst, most insidious capacity. It presents as brain fog and fatigue. So for me, I really upped my hydration game.
Yeah. And as far as the oxygen thing is concerned, it also helps you from the jet lag standpoint. We all know that the cabin altitude differs between varying airplanes and things like that, but the higher the altitude for the longer the period of time, the more likelihood that jet lag, that fatigue, and of course that dehydration, but that's a separate issue will set in. So when you're thinking about, well, what's the carrot at the end of the stick in terms of the exercising and all of that? Well, the carrot is that at the end of the day, you will be less fatigued. You'll maybe have less of a chance of having that sort of post-flight headache or any of those kinds of things. So again, it's that extra benefit, that extra edge that you're getting by doing those activities.
I love that. That's a great point, because I was focusing on GA, but when you're in a pressurized cabin, you're still pressurized at a well above sea level, right? So your body is still kind of in some sort of competition, and by that I mean like almost an athletic competition to maintain itself, right? You're exerting, even though it doesn't feel like it, because we're sitting on a flight deck that's pressurized with cool glowing lights all around and what a view outside. Your body is still working pretty hard to function optimally. And so, yeah, the more you can do to maintain that through stamina building, through strength, through proper food and proper sleep, and I guess proper relationships, will all serve you, any pilot, extremely well, in my experience.
Can I bring us to food for just a minute? I mean, we could probably do a whole separate episode on it. I know, John, you're kind of guiding the discussion, but I don't want to let this go. Can you talk to me about what you eat or what you're bringing on the road? Like, I want to know what's in this flight bag of yours and your views on protein as well.
My wife and I went to northern Spain, Bilbao, in 2017. And north of that is a town called Santander. And just to the west of that are there are caves that are like the caves in southern France, where the Paleolithic people drew these fantastic images. They're the same people who migrated. And in that cave, or next to it, is a museum where they have found archaeological information that indicates how these people lived. These are Paleolithic people. They ate a lot of vegetables, root vegetables, and berries, and other kind of, flowering vegetables, that sort of thing. And whenever they could, they ate as much protein as possible, but they mostly ate greens and vegetables. So it was about that same time that we adjusted our diets, and we're focusing on eating a ton of greens, a lot of vegetables, and also as much protein as possible. So we came back from that trip, and people would say, "Oh, you guys are keto." No, we're not keto. "Oh, you guys are blah blah blah." No, we're not that. We're OG paleo. As in super old school, 17,500 years ago paleo. That's it. We are. So
OG paleo. I love it.
What I bring on the flight deck, I bring a tremendous amount of protein, because that keeps, and then some vegetables and stuff, cooked vegetables, along with that, in addition to breakfast, which are heavy on eggs and some kind of a sausage or a breakfast meat. When I eat wherever I am overnighting, I order enormous salads. I order the biggest salads possible, because those make up for the vegetables and the greens that I can't bring on the road with me, because they just won't keep. So when I'm at home, we eat enormous salads, and they've got either shrimp or chicken or some kind of meat in them as well. That's 2 or 3 times a week. And then we'll have salmon at least twice a week. And even on Sundays, we have a massive breakfast salad on a plate, a lot of eggs and breakfast meats. So I try to bring the same thing on the road. Focus on proteins, a lot of protein that I bring on the road, with vegetables that are cooked that'll keep. And then when I'm at the hotel, I eat the biggest possible salads I can, along with the proteins. And if I can't order a salad that's big enough, I'll order 2.
I love it. John, are you listening to this?
I was just about to ask the most important question of this entire interview. When you were in that cave and you were looking at all of the things that the Paleolithic people were, living with, by any chance, was there a stack of rocks that resembled a pizza oven? Because I'm going to need that.
Oh, bless your heart.
I know what that means.
That's great. I will say, first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of pizza. I love, when we were kids, Uno Pizza opened in Washington, D.C. Big, thick crust pizza with lots of tomato sauce. I love that kind of pizza. That's the kind of thing, like, that's a treat. That's like a birthday. That's 1 or 2 times a year. That's the one thing I personally avoid. I don't eat bread, and we don't eat processed doughs.
John, take notes.
I call that a Friday.
I'm
I have
gonna.
some work to do, is what you're saying.
Oh,
Well,
God.
you know what? The reality is some people say that we're kind of extreme in what we do and that they think that we're suffering, meaning that we're suffering in the sense of giving up, sacrificing stuff. To me, I choose because I really like the food that I eat. I've really grown to love eating so many greens, so much salad, especially on Sunday. I grew up eating pancakes and waffles on Sundays. And I also grew up eating pancakes and waffles on Sundays and falling asleep in church right after that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it was because of the maple syrup or the stuff. So it was a big transition for me to grow to love our breakfast salad, Sunday breakfast salad. It's not for everybody. And it's possible that I could put more bread back in and eat more pizza. But I also know that I stress eat sweets and breads. And so for me, as I work on figuring out how to stop stress eating, I just change to a different kind of food that's healthier for me. So if I'm stress eating, I'm not doing damage. John, you may have no problem, with pizzas and stuff like that. So I'm not going to disparage you that. I would just encourage more greens with the pizza. That's what
everything I'm hearing is I have one more year and then all my world changes. And
this podcast will become a document of like your changes throughout the decades.
So JJ, as we start to wind this down a little bit, one of the questions that we have on our list here, and I think it's really nice to kind of use that as a way to go out on this. But for the teenager, the 20-something, or even just somebody who's looking to make a change in the new year here, what's a good piece of advice from you on that pilot lifestyle? What things can I do now to help me in the future? Outside of kind of, again, what we've already sort of talked about, any good tidbits of wisdom?
Well, I'm laughing because I remember what I was like when I was a teenager, a 20-something and a 30-something. I wasn't listening to some old man.
But you don't look
tell me
old,
to do
so...
what? But that said, look, once a person makes it their idea, then it's a full go. And so I would just encourage people to remember what you do in your 20s shows up in your 30s. What you do in your 30s shows up in your 40s. What you do in your 40s shows up in your 50s, and so on and so on. So whatever it is you're doing now, whether it's nothing or something extreme, you're going to feel that and up for another decade. And if that's how you want to feel, cool, keep on keeping on. But if that's not how you want to feel 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's okay to change. It's okay to change.
Wise words. Use that as your motivation to be better.
Yeah. I can't tell anybody I don't feel like I'm in a position to tell anybody to do anything. I can just share my strength, hope, and courage with them. And maybe they'll take my stories or my experience and see where it applies to their life.
Fair enough.
Brilliant.
Hita, any final thoughts?
Well, this is all so brilliant. And I would say that you're a perfect example of someone that I would have listened to when I was a little younger, because in my yoga tradition, they would always say, like, if you want to know if you dig like the community that you're in for like spiritual work, look at the elders, look at how they move, how they think, how they respond. And if you want to be like that when you're older, try some of the things they're doing and filter it through the lens of your own intelligence, keep what works and get rid of the rest. But I think you're a really great role model of that. So I hope the 10-year-olds and the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds who are listening really take some of this stuff that you have shared with us to heart and start just making small shifts that make sense for everyone's life. Because you're right, you're walking your path, JJ. It's what's working for you. There are elements of that will work for people and elements that won't. But I think what's really fantastic is you sharing that it's a proactive decision that you have made to make the best out of the years that you have on this planet, however long they are. It's not just about living a long time. It's about being really healthy and vibrant while you're here. And I just really appreciate you sharing that's a proactive thing that you're doing. It doesn't just happen. I hear the amount of work you've put into it. So thank you for sharing all of that with the community. It's really
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Valuable.
Thank you for letting me do that. I really, really appreciate the ability to do that. And like you said, it's all about take what you like and leave the rest.
JJ, thank you for coming back. Thank you for being our first reoccurring guest. We appreciate you very much, and hopefully this is not the last time we see you.
All right, dearest listeners, hope you loved that interview with JJ as much as I did. I have been doing a little reflecting since we recorded this interview about his Sunday breakfast salad, and I've got to admit that that has not made it into my rotation as a Sunday breakfast food at this point. I just can't get my head around it. How about you, John? Are you going to be throwing in some salads on your plate? Sunday brunch? Is that a thing?
And give up my Cheerios? I don't think so.
Has.
No. You know, if it's blended into like a juice or a shake or something, I could be considered. I prefer to drink my vegetables versus actually eat them, but still,
Totally.
that's a hard pass for me.
I am all about the thrown in a handful of spinach with my breakfast smoothie. Love that all day long. Once upon a time, I was eating salads for breakfast, but I was doing it by like gritting my teeth and making myself do it, and then I stopped. I don't think at this point I shall return. However, JJ gives me so much hope because he's not actually that much older than I am. And I feel like he's giving us a different roadmap for how we can approach our life and our flying life. Like there's just a lot of active work. It's almost like a part-time job that he's turned it into to be strong and healthy, but it's a very different view of aging. And it really gives me ideas because I'm coming to flying at midlife and I want to fly for as long as I can. So I think by following a lot of his example, it's going to be really helpful to me. What I really liked is that he addresses like those three components we all have as human beings. I mean, we all act in the world, we all think, and we all feel. Like those are the three main ways that we interact: action, thinking, and feeling. And he has like systematically addressed all of those. You know, he reached out for help after his divorce. He was willing to work with trainers to help on his physical fitness. And he did, of course, all this thinking work, writing and staying engaged with aviation, even when he wasn't flying. So I feel like he has this really holistic life, and I really look at him as a role model in my own life. I want to just point one little bit of clarity when we were talking about diabetes, because I do agree with him that diabetes can be greatly either reversed or at least the results of it mitigated with diet. But I just want to clarify, when we say that, we're talking about type 2 diabetes, commonly called, quote, adult onset diabetes, unquote. Type 1 diabetes, often referred to in the past as juvenile diabetes, is when your pancreas is just not producing any insulin at all, and you need to take the insulin shots in order to get the blood glucose to go into your cells and to be used as the body as energy. Those are two very different conditions, even though they both have the label diabetes. And they're two very different things. And I know this is something that pilots deal with. I do know there are some type 1 diabetics out there who have successfully worked to manage their blood control sugars and have active trackers and monitors that actually give real-time information on their blood sugars, where they've been able to get that high degree medical and fly professionally. But it is a big deal. So I just want to clarify for our listeners, there's two types of diabetes there. And when we're talking about that you can greatly reduce or reverse it, mainly referring to that adult onset diabetes type 2. But John, JJ reached out to us after we recorded this, had some stuff to say to us.
Yeah, it was funny. We didn't get him off the line more than maybe 12 hours, and we started getting a lot of messages from JJ saying, oh man, I was thinking about this and I wish I had said that. So he's got a lot of additional things that he wanted to mention and some things he even wanted to, I think, expand upon or clarify. And so we came up with the idea of, well, let's just do a quick bonus episode. So this episode was more about kind of his lifestyle. And then this bonus episode is going to be a little more on actionable tips and things that he has put into place that has worked for him. Now, that's, I think, the part of this that's the most important. It's all of this stuff is unique to the individual. What works for some doesn't always work for others. I'm not eating any Sunday salads. Does that mean I'm going to be a decrepit old man? Maybe. But I'll be happy. So that's where we stand. So I would say look later this week, for an additional bonus episode for JJ. And he's going to share some of his insights and some of the creative things that he's put into place in his life that allows some of the successful outcomes that he's hoping to have. Stay tuned.
I think it's so generous of him to come back and do a bonus episode with all the strategies of his, like what we're calling his train like an athlete approach to life. I think that's going to be really great. Check that out. In the meantime, before you listen to this bonus episode with JJ, if you would, hop on your podcast player and give us a review. We love 5-star reviews. It helps other people to find us. We're just launching into season 2 here. We'd love to get more listeners into this fold, really pushing mental health, mental well-being, performance outcomes for pilots to the forefront of training, education, education, and just the stuff we talk about as pilots. We love those 5-star reviews. You can always reach out to us at calmcockpit@gmail.com. Any episode feedback, episode ideas, or just things that have resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. And you can find us on the socials. Facebook, Instagram, Calm Cockpit Podcast. Follow us there. Excellent. Okay, my friends, until next time, fly smarter
and stress less.
Boston Tower 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 clear.